looks like we've got quite a few participants that have come in now, so we will go ahead and get started. I am Shannon. Welcome to another TeamSense Tuesday webinar. I'm going to be behind the scenes today for our webinar, which is featuring Rob Balena and Emily Kockler. We are so excited to have you both. We're going to cover a few housekeeping items before we get started. Questions are encouraged. We love good questions. We just ask that you drop them in the Q&A box, and we're going to answer your questions at the end of today's discussion. As you may notice, the webinar is being recorded, so if you have to hop off early, totally understandable. We are going to email you a link so that you can catch the replay. You'll also be able to visit teamsense.com/webinars to see all of our past webinars, including this one, and register for future webinars. So we would love for you guys to visit it. It's a really great page with lots and lots of resources for you. Without further ado, let's introduce our panelists. Welcome, Rob and Emily.
Thanks so much, Shannon. Hi, everybody. Great to see you again for another customer spotlight. I'm Rob Balena, Head of Sales at TeamSense, and joining me today is our guest, Emily Kockler. She's an HR professional with over 15 years of experience supporting the hourly and salaried workers. Emily has successfully overseen various aspects of HR operations, including recruitment, benefits administration, and workers' compensation processes. She's overseen engagement and retention initiatives and projects, including the deployment and utilization of TeamSense. Emily, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, to get us started off, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience and where you're located.
Yeah, so I'm located here in Cleveland, Ohio, just outside of Cleveland. And so we're enjoying some lovely rainy weather today. But basically, like they said, I've been in HR for about 15 years. I've done it all, seen it all, been a department of one. So I'm always looking for ways to improve the processes to make my life a little easier and to help make the employees' lives easier as well. So I've just really enjoyed being part of HR and helping the employees and making their workday better.
Fantastic. How did you get started in HR? Was that something you always wanted to do, or did you find yourself there early?
I actually stumbled into it. I worked in the payroll department where I went to school at the College of Worcester. And so I was started in there, which was with their HR department. And so I stayed there for a year after I graduated to help with an implementation of software. And then I got into student employment. So I was helping students get jobs on campus. And then that's kind of where I got a lot more interested in what goes on with human resources and being able to just help people when they have questions about things to just make their lives easier.
You caught the bug at that point.
I did, yes.
So tell me about your relationship with us at TeamSense. How long have you known about TeamSense? How long have you been using it?
Yes, so I actually started looking into TeamSense about 2021, and then I actually went forward with TeamSense in 2022. So basically what we were doing is we noticed with COVID and everything that our attendance call-offs, processes, those types of things kind of took a step to the back burner. And so basically people would call in, they would text their supervisor, they would tell a friend of a friend. That information wouldn't necessarily get down to HR who tracks that information. So it was just kind of a chaotic process where we really wanted to regroup with that. And so I basically went out on Google and was searching for different attendance options that we had, and that's where I stumbled upon TeamSense.
I have heard so many people share that COVID was sort of a turning point, and in a lot of ways, but obviously for our society and everything else, but in particular with regard to attendance and attrition, just a lot of things really, really changed. So, and I think you just described it as sort of, it was like a step back. So you guys had made some progress, you'd established some policies, but what were some of the things that you saw in particular that were going backwards when it came to attendance after COVID?
I think it was just the level of accountability for the employees. They would call, they'd make up an excuse, well, the phone system didn't work, or I have COVID. So, we didn't really want to punish people or discipline people for their attendance because we wanted to make sure that they were healthy and that they were staying healthy as well. So we kind of took that off the table for a while. But then it was kind of like they took advantage of that somewhat. And so they'd come in late, but then we just didn't have because we fell behind on it, we didn't have the accountability on our side as an organization to track that information easily. And so when our supervisors would want to do something, it would be kind of difficult because it would be very reactive to the situation. And we just didn't want to be able to be that way. We wanted to be a bit more proactive.
Makes sense. So it sounds like it was both process accountability, but also having the data to support
Absolutely.
what you were saying. Interesting. Okay. And 2021, you've known TeamSense longer than I have. Thank you for being with us for so long. Tell me about what the deployment of TeamSense was like back in that 2021, 2022 timeframe.
Yeah, so we started in 2022 actually with the whole process of deployment. So we met with Sarah and she walked us through the whole process. So, with TeamSense, you have a call off, you text the number, and then you answer a few questions. So that whole process is customizable. So we started out with that. What do we want to ask our employees? What information do we need for ourselves? I wanted to make it as simple as possible for our employees. And so one of the biggest challenges for us was also that a majority of our population is Latino. So we have a lot of Spanish speaking employees. And so that's always been a challenge too when they call in, because a lot of us don't speak a lot of Spanish. So the communication barrier was a challenge as well. And so with TeamSense, we were able to have those multiple languages to choose for them as well. So we set up the languages, we set up the questions. Also, TeamSense provided us lots of posters, flyers, little cards with the number on it for our employees so we could pass that out. Basically, what I did is I started plastering it everywhere before we even started, just to get everyone used to the change that's coming. We talked about it in our safety meeting as well, and just telling them, what our goal was to just make that information more available for everyone, and to be able to get us all kind of back to where we were before COVID hit as well. And so we went with that. And then when we were ready to really start getting into it, we set up training sessions with our departments. So we had smaller groups. That allowed us to get all of the information from our employees, make sure the phone numbers we have are accurate, because those change a lot. And in HR, as much as we need that information, it doesn't always come to us in a timely manner. So it was helpful to get all of that together for our employees. But then we also did a run through with all of them. So they all had their phones and we walked through the whole process with them. I never been through a system like this before, so I wanted to make sure that everyone's questions were answered, that we weren't missing everything. My goal with anything is to make sure that it's as smooth a transition as possible. So I want to cover all my bases as fast as I can. And so basically we went through that process as well, worked on the kinks, worked with customer support with TeamSense to get all those kinks worked out. And then we basically went live with it. We had some learning curve as always. So there are a few times where people said, I tried to call off, but it didn't work. So I sat down with them after that. We went through it just to make sure that we all understood it. So there was a lot of hands-on training for them, but I think that really helped them and gave them their own resources to be accountable to the process too.
For sure. What a great way to roll things out. Change management is such a big piece of any change, right? But something that's so fundamental to how the hourly workforce manages their time and their day. With regard to that, I talk to a lot of customers and prospective customers, and oftentimes the conversation is like, "Oh gosh, like this feels like it could be a big change for everybody. Like, how do we weigh when we roll this out? Do we align it with some sort of normal policy cadence that we have? Or, how, I think the underlying question is, how big of a lift is this? And so I'd love to hear your experience of like, if you could do it over again, do you feel like you would have done it sooner, faster? Did you give it the right amount of time in the right space? Did it need more time or more space? What was the change like?
I would say probably that I wish we could have had a little more time. I was a little, maybe had some higher expectations for how we would roll it out. My thought is, people use their phones every day. Pretty much everyone has a smartphone. They navigate Facebook, they navigate all kinds of different things. So to text a number absent to me seemed like it should be a fairly simple process. And so I wish I would have taken a little more time to train them on it and to get them to understand what the use was to it as well. what the benefit was for them. Um, we were implementing a new HRIS system at the same time. So I decided, let's just roll it all out in January of 2023. So um, we did all of that together. So there was a lot of change for them, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. Probably would have been better for us to set up a time earlier to do that and to get that out of the way for them. But I mean, we've had very minimal questions with the system after we've implemented it. So, I mean, I think we did all right with the process that we had. But ideally, if I could do it with a little more time for them to understand it, I think I would do that.
Yeah. So staging up those changes so that it's less to consume all at once. That makes sense.
Right.
Yep. After you got over the hump, it seems like things have been relatively smooth. What sort of feedback have you gotten from the hourly workforce?
Yeah, they actually really appreciate it. And I think it's definitely, especially for our native Spanish speakers, they really appreciate having that. We don't have a lot of resources for them in Spanish. As a small company, we just don't necessarily have the resources to do that. So we do what we can. But being able to have that for them so that they can do it in their own language, I think makes them feel a whole lot more included than what they were before. And so that's just kind of a small part that we've helped with increasing or improving that culture as well. But I also think too, one of the big things is that a lot of our employees have said they like not having to talk to someone. So when they call, they don't feel like they have to give some grandiose story. You know, I'm feeling sick. I have a fever. I have this, I have that. They can just simply say, you know what, I'm going to be absent. I'm sick. I'm out. And then their supervisor knows, and they can go back to getting better or dealing with whatever situation they're dealing with as well.
That is consistent feedback that I've heard, that sometimes there's some trepidation of like, oh, this texting thing feels new. Like, are we sure they're going to adopt it? And then once people get a taste of it, like when you're feeling sick or when you're having trouble with your car, or your kid needs help or something, the last thing you want to do is, waiting on hold or leaving a message or having to talk to somebody. And it's so much easier to just have it be a simple text.
Right. Yeah. And I think we've got about 3 or 4 questions, but they're very simple, like the date, what it is. And then if you want to put notes in there, you can. You don't have to, and you can just hit send, and then it goes directly to the supervisor. So I think it really helps to have that as simplified as possible for them too.
That's great. I want to double click on something you said earlier. You mentioned in the initial rollout, it was important to work with the employees to be sure you had updated phone numbers, because phone numbers do change so much. We hear that a ton, right? And making sure that we're a way to manage that process. Since the rollout of TeamSense, how is that handled when phone numbers change?
So right now, what they do a lot is they tell me when their phone number has changed. There's a lot more proactiveness in that as well that I've noticed. Because I don't want them necessarily to be concerned that if they don't get their attendance in, that they're going to get corrective action or whatnot. But I think there's that level of, this matters to me now more, that I have the correct information updated so that I can use it for attendance and there aren't issues going forward. So right now, I mean, even though they can submit a text that says they're absent with the new number through TeamSense, they do come to me a lot, but then I just quickly enter it into the system and then we're good to go.
That's great. Well, and that's a reality. Like, that's a benefit of pressing a process that is absolutely necessary and mandatory, is then there's an incentive to keep it updated. That's really, really great to hear. Have you measured any impacts from teams? I heard you mention the Spanish speaking population and them feeling more included. I wonder if that shows up at all in terms of retention, or if you've seen any changes in behavior with absenteeism or coming in late.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely cleaned up quite a bit from the COVID time. I don't have specific measurable amounts for that, but I mean, we used to have multiple people out multiple days in a week. Now it's maybe 1 or 2 every other week. And so that's definitely improved a lot. And it's just extremely helpful for us, because a lot of our employees, I mean, if one of them's out, that's a big hole for our operations. And so being able to see that our employees are there on a regular basis, our corrective actions have gone down as well. And then I think it also just really opens up the line of communication between the supervisors and the employees. Our supervisors have the same information that the employees have. They know where their points are. The employees know where their points are. So if they're getting close, there's a situation coming up, they might reach out to their supervisor and talk to them about it. Whereas before, they don't really know where they stand with those things. So we might not find out that there's a situation going on that we can help them with, or some medical leave that they might need to be on until after the fact. And it's just better to be more proactive and be able to help them going forward than to get into that point where you're getting into that corrective action. So that's definitely improved as well.
That's great to hear. So it sounds like the greater accountability you mentioned and visibility, like that is a good incremental step at the beginning just to kind of reset things. But then it's almost self-fulfilling and it creates a new culture where people are more proactive. That's
right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because when we started with TeamSense, it was the call off part, but then they got into the points integration so that our employees, with our specific policy that we have for the organization, they're able to see all that information now. And I was really excited to bring that out. Most of the time, we're like, I don't know where I'm at with this. But now, if they want to know, they do a quick text where my points at, they know where their points are. And then the supervisors also have all that information in the dashboard as well, too.
That's exciting. I'm glad that part of that new functionality. That was very impressive to roll that out. Any feedback from individual employees or supervisors on that point?
That part, that has been a big help for a lot of them, just because they felt a little helpless when those conversations would come because they had nothing to stand on necessarily. They didn't have the data themselves. So if there was a question or if there was a doctor's note that didn't get handed in, they couldn't speak to any of that. So it was a lot of just the supervisor saying, hey, you're at this point. This is what we're going to do now. So now there's actually that back and forth conversation with them. And they can discuss. And if there is an issue, maybe there's something that we didn't learn about until later, we can get that corrected as well, too.
Almost a level of like respect and empowerment, right? It's like we're arming you with the best data. We're all going to look at it together.
Right. Yeah.
Do you have any particular stories or times when you were like really grateful that TeamSense was implemented and that you had, an interaction with a supervisor or an employee, a time when it really made a difference?
Yeah, there was one situation with one of our employees that he had missed a whole bunch of days in a row. I had noticed it on there. The supervisor had noticed it. And so we got together with the employee and we're talking to them. They're like, well, I don't remember what those dates are. And I said, okay, let's go through those. And then, it worked out that they were at a doctor and they had a doctor note and they forgot that doctor's note. So, we went and did that. And in our particular system, if you have a doctor's note, it's not an incident, it's not a point. So that helped clear up some of that. But then also got us talking about some of his medical issues, things like that we found that would help us accommodate him better so that he could be there on a regular basis as well and minimize his absences or be excused from his absences for FMLA leave or something like that.
Oh, that's really cool. You mentioned, starting with attendance, you've done some things with points. Have y'all done any work with other functions in TeamSense, mass communication or forms or portal, anything like that?
Yeah, we've done the mass communications. That was also one of the reasons we went with TeamSense, because previously to 2021, we had actually had a couple snowstorms that actually forced us to shut down. And we had no way of communicating that with employees. Like we've discussed earlier, phone numbers weren't accurate, so we were having people call and then it wouldn't be the right person. So we definitely have used that mass communication part. I set it out when we first started our TeamSense, and I just said, hey everyone, TeamSense is up and running. Just so you know, going forward, please communicate your absences via TeamSense. So we've definitely used that, and we've divided it up into departments as well, so the departments can communicate with their employees and just say, hey, we're changing the schedule. It's going to be this for the next day. And I think that's also helped communicate that as well, too, because everyone gets that on their phone. Whereas if we post signs, you can post as many signs as you want, but somehow they'll seem to miss them from time to time. So this is just another way for us to get that information out in front of them as well.
That's great. Yeah. Well, we hear a lot about weather events and using mass communication for that. And like before TeamSense, it was phone trees. It was trying to hunt down the right number. And then that's really interesting about communicating out to the different divisions, and it was it primarily posting things in the facility? That's how you
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So if someone wasn't out or someone was out that day and there was a change, they wouldn't necessarily get that information. So this way, if an employee was out, but they were coming back next day and there was a schedule change, they would know and they'd be able to show up on time too.
You mentioned Sarah on our customer success team, who she's actually been mentioned on this webinar before. So shout out to you. Anything like that distinguishes TeamSense from other vendors? What's if somebody's watching and they're like, okay, I like the technology, but what are the people like? Like, can we trust them, or are they going to help us get from point A to point B?
Yeah, 100%. You can trust them, I believe. I've dealt with customer support multiple times. I've changed my mind on how we've had to do things. So I've emailed them and said, can we do it this way instead? And they're like, yep, sure. We'll flip it around. It'll be done by the end of the day. It's always helpful for me because they outline when that change is going to be fixed, if I have it, if there's anything else that I can expect through the way as well. I know when we were working on the points integration with the Excel sheet that I was working with and with what a TeamSense had, I'll give a shout out to Josh Moon as well, because he was outstanding in this area, but we were having a lot of trouble trying to get that integrated. And so he was working really hard at that. We got calls set up to try and work through it. It just really looked like the system that we had was not going to be able to work. But we worked together to find a solution, one that worked for TeamSense, but also minimized the extra work that I would have to do as well too. And so we were able to work through that all and get that up and running quickly.
Great to hear. Well done, Moon. And well done on y'all for being collaborative and finding a path forward. Let's talk about not TeamSense things. For anyone watching the webinar here that is considering getting into HR, your level of experience, and you kind of described earlier, kind of I fell into it, I kind of found my way.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for somebody who's saying, oh, I think helping employees and supporting them sounds interesting? What advice would you have for getting started in the HR field?
I think, you can do that without being in the HR field. I mean, every day you can be kind to your own employees, to your coworkers, that type of thing. Just getting to know them and kind of help build whatever culture that company is trying to build as well. So, I mean, it's easy to do that without being in HR. HR, you have a little more resources to do that as well. But it's a big task. I mean, there are a lot of different things with HR. As I said, I worked as an HR department of one. So I was doing all of those different things. And if you really love juggling things and keeping things up in the air, that is definitely a career for you, because you never know what you're going to have every day. I always say that I have a to-do list that I start with, and there's probably maybe one or two things I get done, and the rest of the time I'm out helping an employee, helping a supervisor, and just kind of out there and about in the operation as well.
Good to be on the floor with the folks that you're supporting.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
That's great. Any other final thoughts before I pass it over to Shannon for some Q&A?
No, I mean, I've just had a really good experience with TeamSense in general. They've definitely been interested in my feedback. I know there's some other things they've been working on, and I've been giving them some feedback on that as well. So it's really appreciative for them to reach out to their customers to see how they can help improve that as well.
Well, we appreciate you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Shannon, I'll give it back to you, and we can cover a bit of Q&A.
You bet. That sounds great. All right. Before we hop into Q&A, we just want to share a little bit about next week's webinar. So join us next Tuesday if you can. We're going to be talking with Allison and Abika about how TeamSense can support over 25 different languages when communicating with your hourly employee. So join us to learn how we use AI to do that for multilingual employee engagement. Thank you again, Emily, for sharing with us. I would love for us now to move into our Q&A session. So if you have questions, I have a few that have come through as we were chatting. If you have more, feel free to add those to the Q&A section, and we'll make sure that we get to each one of those. Emily, to get us started, we had someone ask, in your experience, how did you get buy-in to adopt TeamSense? And then I will also go with what Rob added and say, just overall in HR, buy-in is something that's difficult. So if you have tips or advice on getting buy-in from your stakeholders and your employees, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, it was, I will say, one of the more easier ones for us to do with the buy-in. I get it. Buy-in for HR is a tough challenge. But I spent a lot of time just with the supervisors, with managers, the president as well, just showing them the technology and walking them through how simple it is, discussing the different challenges that we had, and just kind of showing them those absenteeism rates that we have and just how that can improve production if we can get that number down. And I think that was a big thing for them, is to tie it in financially, to tie it in metrically. And so we were able to show them that if we could get this system in place, that the absenteeism would go down and we would have our employees there making more products, things like that as well.
Love that. And along with that, how long would you say it took for your organization to really fully onboard TeamSense? And I understand it might have taken a little bit longer because you were doing the HRIS at the same time, but can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I would say it took us probably at least 4 months to really get it up and running. I did spend quite a bit of time talking a month or two before that just to get them ready for it. So when we had our safety meetings, I would touch base on our attendance and our policy, reintroducing that as well. And then, going through and having them walk through the system was really helpful, but we still had those issues where they either couldn't find the number, it wasn't working for whatever reason. And so there was just a bit more hand-holding that was needed after that. But I would say it probably took about 4 months for us to get that really on board. And we had about 60 employees at the time. So just to put that in perspective too.
I love that. Thanks for the additional context of that too. Did you look at other solutions, maybe app solutions, and ultimately kind of what made you lean in with TeamSense versus some of the other solutions that you looked at?
Yeah, so when we were doing our HRIS implementation, I was looking with them as well, because I was thinking if we can just do it all in one spot, that would be great. But as I was going through it, the process seemed a lot more difficult with them than with TeamSense, and having TeamSense as something separate was helpful for us, just in case, if we switch to HRIS system, we don't have to go and revamp that as well too. And so we ultimately went with TeamSense for that reason, but also just the ease of the whole situation. I know when I was first looking into it and had the demo, they gave me information so I could play around with it and really understand how it worked and just how simple that process would be for our employees.
Well, thank you. That is all of the questions that came through. If you have more, don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you're interested in a demo, you'll see I put our information up now. Emily, again, we so appreciate you joining us and being a part of our Tuesday webinar series. I think that wraps us up.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. See y'all next week.
See you next week.